about halfway through my full garage renovation, which includes the cool new backdrop for the start of videos now, and I already have a project I really need to get done, while I also need to make about 300 dual vaults with the wood that is currently just piled on the floor right here between me and the camera. I also need to, once again, make a gift for someone quickly with only what I have around the house because #quarantine life. So let's play around with some new CNC woodworking designs and come up with a set of coasters for a Father's Day gift in about a day, because with shipping, I really only have 2 to do the whole project. What I'm going to use is something that I just have a couple pieces of that's not for the vaults, and I'm not trying to be that meme from Reddit about $10,000 pile of wood. So I have a small piece of cherry, which retails probably for something about this big. Getting the full piece and then trimming an inch off of it was about $8. And this one board of teak, which was about 10. So nothing super expensive. Crap ton of plywood in the background. But let's just quickly trim these down and make our coaster set.
So since these are all scrap woods I have around the garage from different woodworking projects, they are all of kind of disparate lengths. I took the cherry piece, which was smaller, and roughly held it on top of the teak board to find a rough cut point, cross cut it on the miter saw, and then headed over to the table saw to make the cut so I could glue up these different pieces of wood to set up the overall design. From there, it's time for a glue up. It's a single cut kind of thing. I'll be doing a lot of the cleanup and planing and finalizing the actual dimensions of the board after this is all glued together. So doing this now saves me a little bit of cleanup time on sanding on the glue seam, and I prefer to put the glue through the planer where it's gonna get powderized and cleaned up pretty efficiently than going through hundreds of passes of manual, even on the random orbit sander sanding. I get a good bead of Titebond 2 and I smooth it out with my finger to make sure we have a great spread, and then clamp it with every clamp that I currently own, which is actually not that many. I use a couple of bracing boards to make sure that we don't have the entire thing bow in one direction from the pressure, and that's pretty much it for the first step.
I desperately need more clamps, but hopefully that thunderstorm isn't going to cause too many problems. It would be hilarious if the lights cut out right then. That is glued up and needs 24 hours to dry, so let's quickly head downstairs, jump on to Carbide Create, and figure out exactly what we're working with. I know you can't see this, but the lights cut out literally. Hey, there they are. They're back. They're back off now. You literally can't make this up. That thunderstorm that I was really worried about in the last clip, as soon as I hit stop, it died. So I have no ability to do the Carbide Create work because the power's dead. Luckily that doesn't need electricity, but it also means that the full garage renovation and everything else I wanted to do today, well, that's on hold too. I really hope this shot doesn't look too awful. I guess I'm going to bed or playing some Animal Crossing. I hope my Switch is charged. That's right, I won't have internet. Read it on the phone, it is.
The next day in the sunlight, with this amazingly beautiful looking shot actually, with power restored, I declamped my finalized workpiece. It clamped up pretty well. There was no bowing, and despite only having a few clamps, I have a really solid bond between the boards. From here, it's off to the thickness planer to get all of the pieces to the same level and also planed down to the final working piece. I'm going for just under ½ an inch for my final workpiece, about 16 millimeters on the overall design. And now, since I have power, it's time to head down to Carbide Create. I'm going with a very simple design, a hexagonal design with a circular impression 1mm inset, so that actually holds the cup. I'll chamfer all of the edges and do all the cleanup on other tools. Really, this is just a simple cut path and a simple pocketing operation. Nothing too fancy. I make sure to set up tabs so that everything won't go flying, and And then I realized right near the end of this that my workpiece was set to be 19 millimeters thick instead of 16. So I changed the dimensions of the workpiece and the workpiece only. And that's something that's going to come back to bite me a little bit later after I cut my first one out. Stay tuned for that. But it's not too complex of an operation, so up to the garage I go.
So now that I have my blank, which I've planed down to the correct thickness, I'm sure it's all square. The board is kind of like gummy in a sense, and I've actually done a little bit of research. It's kind of the natural feeling of teak wood, which makes me a little concerned for machining, but hopefully it's gonna be okay. I'll keep a very high RPM. Hopefully it'll be able to overcome any of that sort of natural stickiness of the wood. The point now is to cut off these ends, cut these into the individual blanks to see how many I can get out of this board. I'm hoping for at least 4. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be fine, and then get them on the CNC.
Back to the miter saw, I made a clean cut off of the areas where the inset piece and the overall teak wood were mismatched, and then using a physical stop, I cut squares that were exactly the same width as they are the overall height of the board. Therefore, I have a clean workpiece. I was able to come up with 8 of these coaster blanks, which means I'm going to be able to make 2 sets as long as nothing goes wrong. Oh, those are very famous last words. I zeroed out my Shapeoko using the new Z probe and clamped everything down, getting ready for my first operation. Things started to look pretty good. I was slightly overbared on the top edge of my workpiece, which I actually dug into the L bracket I made a little bit, which is unfortunate, but they're of plywood, so they're super cheap. If you want to know how to make those, there's actually a video in the top right hand corner explaining all of my work coating solutions that you see on screen. I also added a slight 15-degree rotation on the coaster cut path, which is why it actually ended up in the clamp instead of being perfectly straight, in order to add some randomness, or actually just something interesting to the overall design of the board. This way, the cherry is not going to be perpendicular to the edges of the coaster and is not just going to be a straight line across, but it's going to have a slight angle to it, something that I think is going to make it look just a little bit better and a little bit harder to make. So I don't know. I liked it as a nice touch.
Okay, and I realized 2 things. 1, my camera is full and stopped recording about halfway through that. And 2, the Z calibration was slightly off. So about halfway, or I guess 90% of the way through the carve, actually let me turn this around. About 90% of the way through the carve, this piece cracked and popped off. So this upper corner right here, this piece just popped and immediately like went here as the blade started to come around this corner. And I realized at this point, I had cut through the whole thing. Now I've machine leveled my entire bed, but apparently my Z calibration was slightly off, and I was digging in about maybe 0.5 millimeter. So either I had programmed the thickness of my workpiece incorrectly and I went down into the wasteboard, or just, I don't know, maybe my Z probe was off slightly as far as the Z probing depth. So thankfully, the coaster cut through kind of as expected. It's just the tab depth was a little short, and potentially I'm thinking, actually, I think I might not have done anything overtly wrong. It's just a matter of this corner. Yeah, the corners slightly clip out, so this piece actually becomes fully free floating. So we're gonna wanna correct that, probably putting 1 tab right here to maintain continuity between these 2 pieces so we avoid it. So we're gonna both double check on the Z depth for each individual coaster, as well as making sure that we add an additional tab right here. So that way that doesn't break off. But it was at 96% for the whole job. So I'm gonna call that a less than perfect success. I love that that's just slightly at an angle from that tilt that we put into it. That's so perfect. And let's get started on the next one.
Coaster number 2 with the additional tab added. This time the corner didn't pop out, but I did have a slight other failure at the last moment.
Okay, 0 for 2. This time, the router decided to catch on this edge right here when it lifted up out of creating the tab, and it got caught on a small fleck of the cherry wood, which, since it was right along the seam line between the 2 bonded woods, the cherry dislodged and cause the whole piece to lift up off of the bed. Thankfully, I was working right here, sanding right here with CNCing right here and constantly watching over. And I also knew when we were getting near the end of this job. So I came over, had my hand on that cancel switch since I've already had one failure so far today, and was able to catch this the second it lifted up before anything went really wrong. This will be easy enough to jigsaw out to just get out of the mold. So that's kind of 2 partial successes. 3rd time's the charm.
Take number 3. I was standing over this with my thumb on the kill switch for the Shapeoko, and this one had me so nervous. At this point, if I had more failures, I wasn't going to complete the full set of 4 coasters, so I was extremely nervous, but I was at the same time able to get all of these cool shots of the Shapeoko just doing its thing.
Okay, so I messed up. I instinctively, as soon as I saw the job end, just hit the kill switch for the CNC, but I didn't need to because it worked. We actually have a successful carve all the way through, no issues. Now, I was very conservative with the cut through, so it left this small onion skin around the whole thing. You see just barely a few places where it peeks through. But I did that to preserve the wasteboard to make sure that nothing else was going wrong. This is super easy to jigsaw out, so I'm just gonna do that very quickly. But I learned something. When you cut tabs, don't have tabs go on a place where you've bonded 2 pieces of wood together. See, we all learn something every video. Time to make more.
With the coaster workflow now going somewhat reliably on the CNC, it was time to start with the manual additions to get these things out of their work pieces. I used a jigsaw to cut through all of the tabs, which was really easy because the tabs are just very small, just enough to maintain structural integrity, but easy enough to get rid of, and then used my belt sander to clean up all of the edges to prepare them for routing. I was doing this while the CNC was going on the last few, so I had a pretty good routine of man and machine working together. Then I took them all to the router table for a heavy chamfer on all of the lower edges so that they won't stick to the table if they happen to get wet.
So now I have a full set of routed clean coasters with this nice edge so they won't stick to the ground when things get wet. You'll be able to lift them. That suction effect won't come into play. I have all these extras from when I cut them out of the rounds, and it's these interesting chevron shapes that are just slightly off center and have a little bit of cherry on one end. I don't know if I have a bit of a problem, but I'm considering saving these to potentially build something with them, or all the triangles to put them together for some sort of pattern that might or might not be an indication of beginning to get into a little bit of a hoarding problem. But for right now, I'm just gonna let them sit here and stew for a second while I work on finishing these coasters.
From there, it is the beauty shot and finishing and a little bit of mineral oil and then a few coats of spray poly, which I didn't happen to get on camera, to waterproof them, and the coasters are looking fantastic. I took them downstairs and laser engraved my maker's mark on the back just so I had something to indicate that these were made by me, and I was done.
So I'm told I have a thing for hexagons and hexagon logos, but I don't know. I think this is pretty perfect. A good Father's Day gift, and honestly just something that I'm probably gonna make again. That little doing the cut at an angle makes all of the difference to make this something special over something that was kind of basic as an original idea. If you enjoyed this video, a like, a comment would be super appreciated. If you want to see more CNC and laser chaos like this, I have a video on the dual vaults themselves, the craziness that is that Kickstarter, coming very, very soon, as well as another video on making dice commercially that you're probably going to want to know about if you're interested in the hobby. Until next time, everybody, go out there, be good to each other, and I'll see you around.